Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. You made the trip. We've got want to talk about breathalyzers, pot breathalyzers. Believe it or not, that's something that's coming up, and so we got some discussion on it. So you got DanK, and all by my lonesome. Our friend and our colleague Jeremy is reactivated with working with the Scouts, so he's tied up on Monday nights now, so we won't be seeing him for a while, it sounds like. And anybody like to come down to the studio to visit or to come on the show and tell your cannabis story, you're more than welcome. We're trying to get flyers up around to let people know that it's available and it's possible and it doesn't actually hurt and it can be fun. So let me jump into this, talk about breathalyzers. This pulls a few stories together, and I wanted to bring this up because now that legalization is here, it's even more of a pertinent issue. Of course, it was before with medical marijuana too. And let's start right out here. This is published the 28th of November. And it was in the News Tribune, written by Melissa Santos, titled "Breath Test to Detect Pot is Being Developed at WSU." A team at Washington State University is working to develop a breath test that could quickly determine whether a driver is under the influence of marijuana. Law enforcement officers already use preliminary breath tests in the field to estimate drivers' blood alcohol content, but no similar portable tool exists to test for marijuana impairment via a breath sample. Stoned drivers have become an increasing concern since Washington voters legalized recreational use of marijuana in 2012. A quarter of blood samples taken from drivers in 2013, the first full year the initiative was in effect, came back positive for pot. WSU chemistry professor Herbert Hill said that existing technology, including those already used by airport security and customs agents to detect drugs and explosives, can be repurposed to test breath for THC, the psychoactive component of marijuana. Hill said he and WSU doctoral student Jessica Tufrilio are working on a handheld device that uses a technique called ion mobility spectrometry to detect THC in someone's breath. Right now, officers and prosecutors rely on blood tests to determine how much active THC is present in a driver's blood. Those test results aren't immediately available to patrol officers who suspect someone is driving high. Initiative 502 set 5 nanograms of active THC per millimeter of blood as the legal limit at which a driver is automatically determined to be impaired. Initially, the marijuana breath test under development at WSU probably won't be able to pinpoint the level of THC in the body. It will only tell officers that some active THC is present, Hill said. Still, Hill said, such a tool could prove helpful to officers as they decide whether to arrest a suspected impaired driver. We believe, at least initially, it would lower the false positives that an officer would have. They would have a higher level of confidence in making an arrest. Law enforcement agencies still would have to obtain follow-up test results to use as evidence in court, just as they do following a positive preliminary breath test for alcohol impairment. Hill said he and his research team plan to finish laboratory tests with a prototype marijuana breath test this year, then start testing human breath between January and June of 2015. After that, the researchers plan to test a version of the device out in the field, he said. Some lawmakers at a November 21st meeting of the Senate Law and Justice Committee appeared impressed by the research. WSU is going to be at the forefront, it seems to me, of supplying this kind of science and the technology that's based on it to police all over the country, said Senator Adam Klein, Democrat, Seattle. Bob Calkins, a spokesman for the Washington State Patrol, said the agency would welcome anything that will help us get impaired drivers off the road. He said the State Patrol wouldn't want to use any new technology until it is fully developed, though. It needs to be rock solid before we'll adopt it, Culkin said. Some state officials have expressed concern about increasing numbers of drivers testing positive for marijuana impairment since the drug was legalized in Washington. In 2012, 18.6% of blood samples taken from suspected impaired drivers in Washington tested positive for THC. That number rose to 25% of tested blood samples nationwide in 2013, the first year I-502 was in effect. So now that we have legalization here in Oregon, that's going to be bringing up that problem again, talking about the problem of impairment. So that's why I thought it'd be good to bring this up. This is from the Denver Post. This is dated the 17th of October. Colorado grant to LifeLock funds development of a roadside THC level test. A Wheat Ridge maker of breathalyzers used to detect blood alcohol has landed a $250,000 grant from the Colorado Office of Economic Development to develop a similar instrument to assess THC impairment. THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. The grant, which requires matching funds from the company, will allow LifeLock Technologies to speed development of a tool that will be marketed to law enforcement, corrections, schools, and workplaces. There is no equivalent of a marijuana breathalyzer today. Law enforcement does not have a fast, reliable, and non-invasive THC impairment test available at roadside, LifeLock President Barry Knott said in a statement. So that's the article. Now, here's I included some of the comments that people wrote in, and especially this first one. This first one comes from a guy by the name of Steve Sarich, and he's a drug recognition expert. Now, we've talked about a DRE before, but this is interesting coming from this guy, Steve Sarich. He writes, the title of this article should have read, Colorado Economic Development Program scammed out of $250,000 to develop Rube Goldberg breathalyzer for testing blood for THC. I'm not sure who convinced the Reefer Madness Division of the Colorado Office of Economic Development to invest in a device to measure blood content with a breathalyzer, a device that measures alcohol content in breath. Alcohol is water soluble, while THC is not. THC is lipid soluble and can never be accurately measured in breath or saliva. Not that there aren't other companies that have tried and failed. While this is certainly an area of science that is pretty well documented and could have easily been researched before this agency got conned, the bigger problem is that they are pursuing this in a device like this in the first place. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the Federal Department of Transportation, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and even the architect of the per se DUI program for the Office of National Drug Control Policy, Dr. Robert L. DuPont, the former drug czar and first director of NIDA, all agree. You cannot determine impairment by measuring blood content for any drug besides ethanol, which is alcohol. Dr. DuPont, who coined the term drug driving, has written that drug driving has no relationship to impairment. Drug driving laws are strictly about catching the driver with any measurable amount of an illegal drug in their system. Drunk driving laws will catch only impaired and unimpaired drivers alike. So, if you were to be able to test the THC content of a driver's blood by measuring their breath or saliva, the amount of nanograms per millimeter would not be a valid measurement of impairment. One has to wonder if this contract was granted in a competitive bidding process or if it was just awarded to a company in Colorado that already had strong ties to the law enforcement lobby there, who persistently pushed the state legislative to adopt a per se DUID limit for Colorado. Silence be damned. This is a total boondoggle, and some watchdog group in Colorado should be investigating who's responsible for the $250,000 waste of the taxpayers' money. And another person wrote in, this is a good post, Steve. Reefer Madness still very much alive. They fund each other. There have been no known deaths for many hundreds of years from imbibing marijuana with alcohol kills thousands per year. Both can impair machinery use and lead to accidents, but actual consumption should be the key focus. Yet some people consider our legalization of marijuana reckless. It is sound policy and a blow to the 70% of drug gang profits reaped from marijuana traffic. We need national legalization both as they move against drug violence and the DEA cash cow. Gun control will have zero impact on drug gang enforcement violence, but marijuana legalization will. So anyway, that's some great points, talking about impairment, and that's, like I said, a big issue that's coming up here. And oh yeah, it's another one. I think that they use roadside breathalyzers as a way to legalize potentially legitimate arrests. Even if the person is sober, the roadside breathalyzer acts as a stepping stone for an arrest. So anyway, people commenting on that back and forth, and this was written by Paul Armitano, Normal, California Normal. THC may be detected in breath. This technology already exists. This is not the issue. The issue is whether detecting THC in breath tells us anything definitive in regard to whether a subject is behaviorally impaired. To date, no data exists correlating THC breath detection levels with behavioral impairment, such as breathalyzer detection of alcohol. In fact, none of the studies performed to date using breath THC detection technology have attempted to correlate the detection of THC in breath with actual behavior or psychomotor impairment of any kind. If regulators are truly concerned about identifying potential cannabis inducement impairment, then their focus should be on better ways of accurately identifying impairment of performance, not the detection of particular substances in various bodily fluids. So again, that was from Paul Armitano. He's with the California Normal, a lawyer with California Normal, and writes some really great stuff. And we got one more article on the breathalyzer, which we'll be back when we come back from the break. But right now, we're going to take a break and remind you that the Emerald Empire Hemp Fest is coming up this summer, third weekend, which this year is the 17th, 18th, and 19th of July. We're going to be at Maury Jacobs Park again, and it's going to be even a better one than last year, and last year was the best one yet, so they just keep getting better. So we definitely need volunteers, we need help, get a hold of us. And of course, we've got the big party coming up December 16th. That's It's Legalized celebration party. We'll be talking about that at the next half of the show, so come on back. We'll be here.
And now, a message from the American Marijuana Growers Association.
Hi, I'm a farmer, and I work hard every day to grow high-quality marijuana, the biggest cash crop in these United States. I'd like to thank you for your support of U.S. marijuana policy. Because marijuana is illegal, I don't have to pay taxes. Even better, prohibition leads to artificially inflated prices, which means a better quality of life for me and my family, as long as I don't get caught. Just as importantly, your tax dollars support thousands of U.S. agents who work tirelessly to keep low-grade, foreign marijuana out of our country. So thank you, America. And remember, whether you're nauseated from chemotherapy or just in the mood for a nice cool buzz, choose the best pot in the world, American Homegrown.
Welcome back to the second half of episode number 5. Uh-oh, missed my notes up here. Oh yes, there we are. Episode 557, and welcome back. We've been talking about breathalyzers, pot breathalyzers, And all these articles were written on within the last couple of weeks, actually. But this one here is written again by Paul Armentano of California Normal. This one was written about a year ago, at the end of October 2013. The problem with pot breathalyzer. Law enforcement officers have long relied on breathalyzer technology as an on-the-spot roadside detection test for alcohol ingestion. But can similar technology ever be used to identify recent cannabis ingestion? A recent study indicates the answer may be yes. Investigators at the National Institutes of Drug Abuse in Baltimore, Maryland, and the Karolinska University Hospital in Stockholm, Sweden, conducted breath assessments of 24 self-identified cannabis consumers. Subjects each inhaled one standardized cannabis cigarette of 6.8% THC and then exhaled into a breath pad at various points of time over the following several hours. Researchers sought to identify whether detectable levels of delta-9 THC, its primary metabite, THC, COOH, or CBN, a non-psychoactive cannabinoid, can be recovered in the breath pads, and if so, for how long? Excuse me. Researchers reported the ability to accurately identify the presence of THC in both occasional and in regular consumers for limited periods of time following subjects' inhalation of marijuana. THC remained present in the exhaled breath of habitual users for longer periods of time than it did in those who only used it occasionally. Authors concluded, quote, among chronic smokers, all health samples were positive for THC at 0.89 hours. So in other words, just less than an hour. 76.9% at 1.38 hours, and 53.8% at 2.3 hours, and only one sample was positive at 4.2 hours after smoking. Among occasional smokers, 90.9% of breath samples were THC positive at 0.95 hours, and 63.6% at 1.49 hours. One occasional smoker had no detectable THC. No samples tested positive for the presence of the carboxy-THC mebolite, and only one subject tested positive for the presence of CBN. The NIDA study is not the first to establish that breath collection technology is sensitive to the presence of THC in those who have recently consumed cannabis as well as other controlled substances. Writing in the April edition of the Journal of Breath Research, Swedish researchers reported that analytes of THC as well as cocaine, methamphetamine, morphine, methadone, and other drugs can be identified in subjects' breath or up to a period of 24 hours following drug ingestion. Specific to THC, the researchers reported that breath analysis identified the substance in 89%, 8 of 9 subjects who reported recent pot inhalation. Authors of both studies said that their findings confirmed the potential for using exhaled breath analysis as an alternative special matrix for toxicological analysis, with NIDA's researchers speculating that the technology may possess applicable ability for identifying recent driving under the influence of cannabis, but the latter assumption would appear to be premature. First, breath test technology is simply a detection test, not a per se indicator of whether subjects are under the influence of drugs. To date, no such data exists correlating THC/breath detection levels with behavioral impairment, such as breathalyzer detection of alcohol at levels above 0.08 in blood have been correlated as valid predictors of alcohol-induced driver impairment. In fact, neither study even attempted to correlate the detection of THC in breath with actual behavior or psychomotor impairment of any kind. Further, alcohol remains unique among drugs in its predictability, both in its pharmacogenics, the drug metabolization by the body, and behavioral effects. As a result, the United States National Highway Safety Administration acknowledges toxicology has some important limitations. One is that, with the exception of alcohol, toxicology cannot produce per se proof of impairment. So, while it is possible that breathalyzer drug technology may possess certain potential advantages, e.g. it can be administered on-site rather than post-arrest hours later, over urine or blood specimen collection, two matrices that are notoriously unreliable for establishing either behavioral impairment or recency of drug use, it is unlikely to provide any direct or definitive evidence of whether or not one is driving under the influence of cannabis or anything else. So there you have it. It's a little confusing, goes back and forth, but all in all, it sounds like it's not too likely that they're going to come up with it. And if they do, it might be kind of suspicious. We might have to take a really close look at it to see if it's really valid. And then we've got another registered guard. No, excuse me. This is in the Oregonian guest opinion, and this was written by Rachel O'Brien. And Rachel O'Brien is a co-founder of Smart Colorado, a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting the health, safety, and well-being of Colorado youth as marijuana becomes increasingly available and commercialized. So she wrote a guest opinion piece titled, "Oregon Must Include Public Health Representatives in Public Regulation Process." Now that Oregon voters have passed Measure 91 legalizing recreational marijuana, the monumental task of regulating its industry begins. Constituents must remind their representatives that implementing regulations should put the needs of a society as a whole before those of the marijuana industry. This will be difficult. Oregon already has medical marijuana dispensaries. Unless action is taken, these established businesses will be the prime voice heard by lawmakers and regulators when crafting policies and regulations. Their interest is generating young lifetime customers, not the greater good of the entire community. How can balanced regulations be accomplished? First and foremost, state legislatures and regulators must ensure that the voice of public health and safety is heard. Seats at the table must be reserved for medical and mental health professionals, educators, and parents. Police departments must ask for the funds needed to shut down black market growers and sellers, and to enforce the prohibitions against use of marijuana in public places and marijuana cultivation in public view. Community organizations must encourage the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to limit licenses so that marijuana isn't more convenient to buy than a hamburger or a grand latte, and that pot shops shouldn't outnumber McDonald's and Starbucks. State medical and mental health experts who were gagged during the campaign must now speak up about the mental health and substance addiction risk for adolescents who use marijuana and the adverse effects associated with high-potency marijuana products. Parents should insist that the Commission keep marijuana out of candy and other foods that are traditionally marketed to and consumed by kids. Look to Washington State and Colorado for models. Washington State hired Mark Kleinman, a drug policy analyst from California, to consult on legalization. He anticipated problems arising from the creation of an industry whose objectives contradict public interest. He understood that for-profit marijuana businesses would market to heavy or addicted users, just like alcohol and tobacco companies. He recognized that enforcement would need to increase initially to catch people who refuse to play by the new rules, thereby helping shrink the black market. Colorado did not hire an expert consultant, choosing to rely instead on stakeholder committees. Early results were troubling. In January 2013, the governor-appointed task force ranked the health, safety, and well-being of Colorado youth last among 8 guiding principles, far behind marijuana customer needs. What changed between January and the passage of the Colorado Marijuana Retail Code of May 9, 2013? The formation and arrival of a nonpartisan organization called Smart Colorado. Smart Colorado's membership included concerned citizens from the business community, healthcare, education, and law enforcement who opposed and supported Amendment 64, Colorado's constitutional amendment that legalized recreational marijuana. Smart Colorado's cadre of volunteer leaders attended and testified at committee meetings, met with and educated lawmakers, and proposed statutory language. Provisions that likely would not have existed but for Smart Colorado's perseverance included potency and contaminant testing, health warnings, and a universal marijuana symbol, child-proof packaging, per serving and per package THC limits, and restrictions on marketing and advertising targeted at youth. Even the proponents of legalized marijuana recognize the value of Smart Colorado's contributions. During the 2014 legislative session, a drafter of the Amendment 64 partnered with Smart Colorado to pass two bills, one addressing marijuana concentrates and one addressing marijuana edibles. Who will be Oregon's voice for public health and safety? So that's the guest editorial in the Oregonian. So anyway, interesting points. We'll see what happens when the legislature takes a hold of our legalization bill and see what they can do with it or to it. Anyway, I appreciate you coming in, dropping in, checking out our show, and we're trying to pass out cannabis information, help people in the whole cannabis spectrum. So if you need any help, get a hold of any information, get a hold of DanK. You can write to me at dankbagman@hotmail.com. See you next week. I'll be here, and I hope you will too. We'll see you then.